This Articuno is worth $20, but it sells for more than $200 in a PSA 10. Today I'm showing you Pokemon cards that can 10x in price just by grading them. And you might already have some of these at home. Watch until the end to see which ones are absolute gold mines right now. Let's start with Journey Together, that apart from the Articuno that we've mentioned, there's a bunch of cheap cards that you can flip grading for insane profits. For the same price range, you can buy a Wailord for $20, the illustration rare, and grade it in a PSA 10 for more than $190. The good thing about these huge margins is that you can try with a lot of copies, and if some of them work, you will already make profits. By the way guys, I'm giving away this Umbreon Neo Discovery booster pack when we hit 10,000 subscribers on this channel. Thank you so much for supporting me. This is completely free. The only things you have to do is to like, comment and subscribe. If you want to go even cheaper, you can grade Ents Reshiram from Journey Together 2, that is actually a promo card with the enhanced version of the booster box. It's only going for $14, and graded in a PSA 10 it's worth more than $108. But you know, we can go even cheaper. If you just want to buy a card that's below $10, I recommend these two. Ionos Kilowattrel is only going for $9 right now, and in a PSA 10 it's worth more than $90. Of course, with these cheaper cards you gotta be careful because just grading them will cost you around $15 to $20, so keep that in mind. Even better than this, we've got the Forehead illustration rare, which is going for $7 right now, and if you grade it in a PSA 10 it will be worth almost $120. But grading for profit is not always about the multiplier. Sometimes you pay high for a card, but the price difference between the raw version and the PSA 10 is so good that you can actually afford to grade multiple of them. If you have a lot more budget, you can go for the chase card of the set, which is Lily's Clefairy, of course worth $150. Don't get me wrong, this is pretty expensive, but in a PSA 10 it's worth almost $500, so you have great margins there too. Now, while Journey Together might be one of the best sets to do this right now because it's pretty new and it doesn't have a lot of population of PSA 10 cards, there's a bunch of sets where you can do this. Let me show you some examples like Surging Sparks. If you want to go really cheap, you can grab the Slakoth illustration rare for less than $9, and again, it's worth more than $90 in a PSA 10. When you see that the PSA 10 version is worth more than 10 times of the raw, that's a pretty good signal that you can grade that card without worrying much about the money. But here, there's more interesting versions. Of course, I'm talking about the Latios illustration rare from Surging Sparks. This card is worth about $27 to $28 right now, and in a PSA 10 is worth $150. I understand these margins are not that great as the ones we saw before, but I think this card will increase in price both in the raw version and in the PSA 10 version. So if you're trying to do this, the margins are still pretty healthy, and I think you get in your hands a card that will actually be worth a lot more in the future. Of course, if we talk about the chase card of Surging Sparks, something similar happens here. The Pikachu special illustration rare is worth $260 raw. I know it's a lot of money, but in a PSA 10 it's worth more than $710. So you have a really healthy margin there, and same as the Latios, I think this is one of the chase cards of the Scarlet and Violet era. I understand why this is much more expensive than the Clefairy, because it's actually a Pikachu, the card is way more desirable, and actually I think Surging Sparks is a far better set than Journey Together. Same as the Latios, I think this card will be worth more in the future, so I think you're doing a safe bet if you're trying to grade this card in a PSA 10. If we talk about chase cards, we also have to talk about the chase card of Obsidian Flames, which is the Charizard EX special illustration rare. I don't really like this crystal Charizard, but it's worth $60, and in a PSA 10 it's worth more than $330. So you have a pretty good flip there. Quick disclaimer, Obsidian Flames is really hard to grade. A lot of the cards don't come back as a PSA 10, so make sure to check the card is well centered. It has zero widening before sending it because it can be a bit tricky. But what I like about Obsidian Flames is that it has like some really cheap cards that if you grade in a PSA 10 you will get a lot of money. The first example is the Cleffa illustration rare, which is worth about $16, and in a PSA 10 it's exactly 10 times that, which is $160. But my personal favorite is the Larvitar illustration rare, which by the way I also love the card. It's only worth $4, which is kind of crazy. I think this card will be more expensive in the future, and apart from that it's worth 20 times more in a PSA 10, which is $80. Let's move to Paldea Evolved, which for me, it has the best illustration rares in the Scarlet and Violet era. I know that's bold to say, but they have a bunch of illustration rares that are really beautiful and that they are actually pretty cheap for the prices of the booster box, which is going for more than $300 right now. The first card I want to talk about is the Mariel illustration rare. This is not super cheap, this is going for around $25, but in a PSA 10 it's almost $300. Again, same as Obsidian Flames, the first sets that were released in the Scarlet and Violet era are a bit hard to grade, but with these huge margins you can actually afford to grade multiple of them, so make sure to check the copy in person. As I said in the first video talking about grading cards, make sure you check it in person. Don't buy cards online in near mint hoping they will be a PSA 10. That's really bold for you to do. Check the card in person every time that you can. Now the next card is Tyranitar. This Tyranitar is going for $40, but in a PSA 10 it's almost $400, so you have this huge gap. Another kind of expensive illustration rare but that you can flip for a lot of money is the Raichu, the Sleepy Raichu. I love this card. I think this card looks really good. Again, it's worth around $40, but this in a PSA 10 is around $300. So if you're doing this purely for profit, I will probably try with the Tyranitar, which has better margins. But what I like about this set, and sorry for repeating it, but it's the Magikarp illustration rare. This is the chase card of the set, and it has increased a lot in price since the first version. I remember when I made the first edition of this video, like some months ago, this Magikarp was about around $90 to $100, and you could flip it for $600 in a PSA 10. Now everything has doubled. This card ungraded is around $200, and in a PSA 10 it's worth more than $1,300. That's the price of a raw Umbreon, which is absolutely insane to me. And this is just an illustration rare, but it has clearly made itself one of the chase cards of the Scarlet and Violet era, and I really respect that. Again, keep in mind that this card is super hard to grade, so don't think every single card that you will send to PSA will come back as a 10, because that's not realistic at all. By the way, if you struggle to find any of these cards or any Pokemon product right now, what I recommend is using a tool like today's sponsor, which is Pokenotify. They have a Discord community server where you get notified every time that something at retail just pops up at a new store, or maybe at Walmart, Amazon, all the stores you know, but you will get notified instantly. This makes our job to buy at not scalped prices really easy, and I think for the current market is absolutely necessary. Think that any product you grab, you're saving $30, $50 or even $100, so paying $7 to $8 for this cheap subscription is actually really worth it. You have a 3-day free trial where you can try if you like the platform or not. That's completely free, and you get a 25% discount if you use the code PokeBeam25. Everything is in the description and the first comment. There's a set I don't really like, and it's the 5th set of the Scarlet and Violet era. It's called Temporal Forces. I don't really like this set. I don't like these temporal Pokemon, like this Paradox Pokemon and stuff, but this card has great illustration rares that can be graded with huge margins when graded as a PSA 10. The first one is the illustration rare Ghastly. I completely love this card, I gotta be honest. It's worth $40. This card has been heavily manipulated in the past and the price has fluctuated a lot, but in a PSA 10 it's worth more than $240, so you have that sweet $200 margin that allows you to actually grade a lot of these cards. The next one is probably my personal favorite card inside the set, which is the Metagross illustration rare. This card has been in a lot of my videos talking about cheap cards because it used to be like $4 to $5 and it's now worth almost $20. But the good thing is that in a PSA 10 it's worth $130, so again you have huge margins. In the same way I had to disclaim you about the first sets of the Scarlet and Violet era, I have to say that Temporal Forces is actually better for grading than Obsidian Flames and Paldea Evolved, so I think you will be more safe grading multiple of these copies, and I would say that more of them will come back as a PSA 10, so even if you don't have these huge margins as Obsidian Flames, you're pretty safe grading these cards if you check them correctly. Now let's talk about two cards that are a set and that look absolutely beautiful, honestly, and it's of course the Deerling and Southbook illustration rare. They both go for around $20 and they both sell for between $120 and $150. What I like about these cards is that you can grade them together and they make a beautiful set, so if you're trying like to keep it as part of your collection or maybe an investment, whatever you want to do, it's really cool to have these sequentially graded, which means like grading them together back to back in the same shipment, and I think they will be a reasonable set to sell together in the future, or if at some point you just want to sell both of them, it will be kind of easier than just selling two random slabs. Tell me what you think in the comments, and if you know some card that I have missed or that you want me to talk about in the next video of this series, just let me know in the comments. I think people will also appreciate your help. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.